Well, good day, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of WTF Walk the Floors, all things hospitality training. I'm Stephanie Ledger with First Rate Hospitality, and I'm joined with my co host, Michele Kline of Kline Hospitality. How are you doing today, Michele?
I'm doing great, Stephanie. How about you?
Doing well. We're in the midst of craziness of spring break, and I know you all are getting ready for summertime, so it's definitely a lot going on. So,
We
what are we
are.
going
We
to
are
talk
getting ready for summertime, but we are kind of extending the winter. We have a
about?
lot of it's been a very wet winter, which is great because we definitely need the water on the West Coast.
Oh, yes, absolutely. We'll send that all your way. All right, so
If only
what
we
are we
could
gonna
tilt the country.
Yeah, exactly. And then when we need it, then we'll bring it back. But all right, so enough of us chit-chatting here, but what are we gonna be able to talk about today? What's our topic about, Michele?
So today we're gonna do part two of attitude and accountability. We have one of our training modules has to do with how do we move the needle, and we are strong believers that we move the needle when we look into the attitude that we have in front of the things that we do, and then also holding ourselves accountable. So this is part two of an episode that came out a few weeks ago, and it's going to wrap it all up in a little bowl, and we'll give you all the tidbits that you need to make sure that it all makes sense as you work through the first episode of this two-part saga.
Perfect. All right, so getting right into it, what is accountability to you? What does that mean when you're telling employees we have to be able to be held accountable?
That is a great question. So here's the thing. If you look it up, you will find that accountability is an assurance that an individual or an organization is evaluated on its performance or behavior related to something for which it is responsible, right? The term is related to responsibility, but is regarded more from the perspective of the actual oversight. So when we talk about accountability, it's important that there is some sort of buy-in when it comes to holding oneself accountable, when it comes to the responsibilities that I have in order to move that needle or get the job done. But we'll go into those details as we move through our conversation.
Perfect. I like how you had mentioned that it's both, the performance and then also too of their attitude as well of holding them accountable. Because how many times that we've had employees or team members where yes, they're doing what the technology or the technical thing that they need to do, whether that be serving a guest in the restaurant or checking in a guest at the front desk, but their attitude is not that genuine hospitality, that they're just, really making comments that's bringing the team down. And, you even have to hold your team members accountable even for their attitude. Not saying they have to be all happy go lucky like it's Disney World, but still to even being professional and then keeping the environment in a positive environment in the department.
Absolutely. And that's exactly the reason why we tied both topics together, attitude and accountability, because again, behavior and performance have to go hand in hand in order for us to start making the changes that are appropriate to move that needle, to get to those goals, to have great customer service scores, to get the revenues that we are seeking or that we have as an objective in any business that we manage.
Perfect. All right. So moving along. So why is accountability important to have that in our departments?
So accountability eliminates the time and the effort that you spend on the distractions of different activities that will lead to unproductive behavior. Once again, we're talking about performance and we're
Mhm.
talking about behavior, right? Attitude and accountability. So when you make people accountable for their actions, you're effectively teaching them the value of their work. So when we do it right, accountability can increase the team member's skill and their confidence. So it's important that we're not only applying the accountability from the outside as supervisors, as managers, as leaders, but also that we teach our team that accountability starts with you. So, how do I hold myself accountable? And that's where behavior kicks in. So,
Mhm.
accountability, I would say, it's always going to foster a better work environment. It's going to foster better work relationships. It's going to improve job satisfaction because you're going to be happier where you are. If you see that other people are holding themselves accountable, if you see that leadership is holding other team members accountable, so now you feel like whatever it is that you're doing or the effort that you're putting in, it's not unnoticed. And you don't have someone who's, getting away with murder, so to speak, right?
Yes, exactly. Because I was just going to say, is now look at it on the totally other side of the spectrum when you're not holding your team accountable. And now your team members are just running around, and, they're the ones really being able to do whatever they want without being accountable, like showing up late all the time. And then all of a sudden you decide to hold them now accountable. And then the employees are like, whatever, because I've been late, for the last two weeks, and now you want to hold me accountable. So it's important to hold it and then being consistent with the accountability as well.
Absolutely. And communicating those changes, right? If you are going to start holding people accountable for perhaps
Mm.
um, clocking in before you even park your vehicle. How many of those cases do we see anytime we go into a project? And what that does is I'm going to start holding, I caught this person, you're being held accountable moving forward. But what that does is it creates that drama with other employees saying, well, I know this list of other people that are doing this. So if you're able to be a step ahead and communicate moving forward, even though the policy has been there so far for X amount of years, we're going to start enforcing it. So make
Yes.
sure that you look at what you are doing, right? And that's when we empower that team member to truly take ownership on, again, their performance
Mhm.
and their behavior, right? And when they take ownership of that performance and behavior, that's when we create more effective teamwork. That's when the team starts working together, starts collaborating, starts moving the needle as a whole, as opposed to pointing fingers and not being happy with what they're standing.
Perfect. And that's a great transition to our next question here is, how can we create a accountability with, the culture of the department as well. And I think it's great when you're are as the leader is holding your team accountable, and then the team members start holding each other accountable. And that may be with, some of the banter being like, oh yeah, Michael's always late, and then you're getting called out of it by your own team members, and you're like, oh shoot, I should probably start, leaving the house 15 minutes earlier so my team's, not bantering with me.
Yeah, absolutely. So I was able to narrow it down to 7 very specific points or tidbits, right? 7 nuggets that, as long as you take these 7 things into consideration, then you will start seeing some changes when it comes to people taking ownership over their performance and their actions. So, the 7 points are the following. Number one, and I think it's the most critical one that we don't do often enough, is set clear expectations. It's the
Mhm.
first question that is always going to come out of my mouth when I sit down with a leader and the leader tells me their sob story about how things are not working out and how Peter or Mary are not responding. I ask, do they know what you expect? Right? Setting clear expectations will allow the person on the other side to truly comprehend how am I supposed to perform and behave. Secondly, get mutual agreement. What does this mean? What this means is I know I need to, I don't know, let's say we have to increase our customer service scores. So, what are the things that we need to do in order to start moving those scores from red to green? So, getting into that mutual agreement as to this is going to be my part. And as long as I own this part, we are going to get into the green. But then you are going to move this other piece and you're going to be responsible for this other piece. And collectively, as we come together, then we start moving from red to green. Number three, providing support. It is so critical that when we hold people accountable, we provide them with support, and support not only in the fashion of what are some of the tools that they're going to need to get the job done, what are some of those things that perhaps is like how do we get rid of some of these barriers so that they can provide that specific level of service, or they can act in a specific way when guests are around, whatever that looks like to you, providing their team members with support. But also the support on the other side, right? The emotional aspect of it, which again, we talk about performance and behavior, the one that is going to address the behavior. I am not, as a leader, supporting my team if I'm only going after one person. That's when things get very sticky from an HR perspective, right? Are we being
Yeah.
fair? Are we using the same type of expectations, and are we measuring the performance in the same way for everyone, right? Are we allowing some person to get away with a specific behavior that we don't allow that from someone else? So providing support both from the tactical standpoint or the technical standpoint, but also from the emotional standpoint as well. And maybe it has to do with what do you need from me in order to be able to commit to that responsibility, to own that new task that is going to help us move the needle, right? Getting engaged with that team member from an emotional standpoint helps us to allow them to know, high five, you got this, you can do it, and this is I'm going to help you with it, right? Number four, monitor progress. People play a different game when they know if they're winning or they're losing. That's all I'm going to
Mhm.
say. I
Mhm.
don't want to share all of it, but just keep that in mind. Monitoring progress is extremely critical. Number five, giving feedback. If we're not sharing what we see as leaders, if you're not sharing what you see as a line level employee with your leaders, you're not going to be able to move the needle, right? Number
Yeah.
six, analyze effectiveness. Are we doing things the right way? Are we putting in too much work into trying to move the needle? Or are we doing it in a smart way? Are we working smart instead of hard? And then lastly, being compassionate. It's important to be able to put yourself in somebody else's shoes and understand what it is that they're going through when it comes to accountability. Is there a fear in the middle that maybe they don't want to take on that responsibility because they're fearful for X, Y, and Z? So being able to have those connecting type of conversations with your team members, I think it's is important to, you know, to hone in on what accountability is really all about. What do you think, Stephanie? What do you want to
No,
add?
I love all of those points. I couldn't agree more. But I would have to say too, with a lot of this, is making sure too that you're documenting, that there is a piece of paper, there is a sign off that's happening. If it whether it's you're holding them accountable and they weren't performing or about their behavior. But then also too, I think it was number 2, you were talking about that, setting those expectations. You and I can be able to having that conversation, but if it's not visual for them to being able to see it, then they can come back and being like, I was never told that. That's the HR in us. But then also too, a lot of people learn differently where they're more of a
Yep.
visual than receiving the information verbally. So I would have to say with those, always applying it to a way of being documented to save you know, your butt. That's a part of the leader from an HR standpoint, but then also too of helping your team of giving them other tools to being able to showing what needs to be done and how they're going to be held accountable.
Absolutely. And what's important to piggyback on that additional nugget, Stephanie, is that if not not just the very important fact that not everyone learns the same way, right? Not everyone
Mhm.
is going to see things the same way, but making everyone part of how do we monitor the progress? How do we see if we're winning or we're losing? Having that visual aid that gets me excited every day, right? As opposed to every Wednesday when it's 9 o'clock rolls around and you're about to get that email with your scores and you're like dreading it. So
Mhm.
part of what we do with our the um, goal execution um, training within our full day module is that the execution module is that we have an extra half day that we will dedicate to building these tools so that we can
Mhm.
truly hone into what are those goals that you got to start setting from now on, depending on the level that you're in, gaining that ownership. And then how do we put it up on a board so everyone has that visibility as to where are we at? Not only where are we at as a team, but where are you at as an individual contributor?
Exactly. And also too, with that added on of that extra component for our training is breaking down barriers. There's so much right now that the leaders are fearful of holding their team accountable. They're afraid that now I'm going to hold my team accountable. They're not going to like it and they're going to go somewhere else. And now I'm going to be short staffed. Or all of a sudden, now I'm going to hold my team accountable, and now they're going to spend the rest of the day in HR thinking that they're the ones that are being targeted and not the rest of the team being accountable. And so I feel that, with our extra training that we do provide, is then being able to assess and seeing how we can be able to break down. Some of those barriers because each department, each property is different, and there's different reasons why they may not be holding their team accountable to the way that they should.
Absolutely. And very recently, we recorded an episode that where we touched base on the fact that there is that working in silos, right? And what do I
Mm-hmm.
mean with this? And if you get a chance to go back to that episode, we talked about how maybe you have a designer that is setting up a specific chair in a specific angle, and then when you go in, you realize that from the guest perspective, this is just not going to work out. And then you have a
Mm-hmm.
designer that is selecting a specific paint to go on the walls or a specific material. And then from the housekeeping standpoint, that's not going to fly because it's not going to it's not going to be sustainable, right? And this is so important when it comes to accountability, because it's having that collaboration between all the different aspects of that operation, so not only a group ends up in HR, but everyone is pushing towards the same goal, is essential so that you
Yes.
can move the needle.
Perfect. Well said. All right, so now we're going into our WTF moment. And I know we were talking about this before we were getting ready to record, is like those WTF moments when we've had to hold others accountable. And sometimes they didn't go the way that we wanted. And also, too, probably shouldn't be talking about it on the podcast. So we're going to make it very just more on the other side of, those aha moments when we did hold the team accountable. And it really, we saw the success in guest scores. And I even have friends that, well, they're friends now, but in the beginning, I was, their leader and holding them accountable. And we still talk about it, of how I held them accountable. And now they, so much more respect because I held them accountable. I can actually think one just came to my head is, I have a great friend in New York, and she is a telephone for receptionist for housekeeping. So she's the one always answering the phones for all the guest calls and the employees calling down. And she is well known in the area because of what her husband does for hotels. So they kind of put her on a little pedestal. And here I come in of being like, okay, we're training on Forbes standards. You better be answering that phone within 3 rings. And my
Mhm.
desk just so happened to be right by her, and she would let the phone ring 4 times, and I knew she was on social media because she would be like, oh, I see you did this, this, and this over the weekend. And I would be like, well, you need to make sure that you're answering the phone within 3 rings. And then finally, I had to have a sit down conversation and saying, if you do not answer the phone while I'm here within the 3 rings, we're going to now need to move to a coaching and counseling. And everyone was like, and I was like, I don't care who your husband is. This is the standards, and I'm holding you accountable. And we're such good friends. And we always, joke about how our relationship started when I first came in and started working at the property, and getting on her case and holding her accountable for the 3 rings to making sure we're within the luxury standards. So it's definitely an aha moment that we joke about now.
Absolutely. So you're teeing me off perfectly well to close the loop. And this is how. Accountability starts with someone creating expectations and making sure that you're delivering on those expectations, right? And when we talk about creating that sense of ownership or responsibility, which is ultimately where we want to go, we have to take into consideration that self-discipline is the secret sauce to accountability. Simple as
Mm-hmm.
that. It starts with someone else from the outside, but then it is up to you to make it sustainable by injecting self discipline, right?
Yes.
It is a personal choice to rise above the circumstance or to demonstrate that ownership necessary to start moving that needle, right? There is something that we use in hospitality a lot, which is see it, own it, solve it, do it, right? We go
Mm-hmm.
by those rules because we have to make ourselves accountable. We run 24/7 operations, and there is no way that you can be on top of absolutely everything. But if
No.
everyone has that little grain of self discipline and self accountability, then it's easier to maintain a certain level of standards, right? So my WTF moment has to do with, again, there is so much that I can come up with because part of what we do for a living is we come in and we assess, and with the assessment comes hardcore accountability, right? And we can
Yes.
communicate this way better today than we did 20 years ago when we started our careers, or over 20 years ago. We've become better communicators at it. So the end result is a lot better and there's less pushback. But the reality is, we are holding people accountable constantly. So,
Yes.
what it is that I want to bring up is the following. Once I have coming into many operations, I used this very specific program where, again, injecting that particular sense of ownership, where each team member decided how they believed they were going to move the needle, with obviously a temperature check and a checkpoint in the mix. That is where things started moving. And
Mhm.
when coming into this very difficult project, probably one of the hardest projects I've ever encountered in my career, because of the behavior and the attitude of the people within the project, coming in and saying, we're going to start seeing some changes within 2 weeks, and people thinking she's crazy. And I said, lean in, take the process, believe in the process, and you're going to make it happen. And within 2 weeks, people coming back to the boards and saying, wow, we did this. So what happens next? They want more of it. So now you
Yes.
caught them, you hooked them, right? So that's my, I want to say, my aha moment when it comes to accountability. It all
Nice.
depends on you.
Love it. Yes, absolutely. And the way that you're delivering it too. I think as well, getting to know your team, of knowing who, the way that you have to deliver it to someone, that may be a little bit more sensitive compared to someone that's like, no, just be a straight shooter. Tell me what, I need to do and hold me accountable. I don't need all of the fluff. Where some other people kind of need some fluff to soften what needs to be done. And
Absolutely.
and the one last thing I wanted to add too is, you as leaders that are watching us or listening, and you're like, wow, how, I need to do a better job of holding my team accountable and I don't know where to get started. I want to say is reach out to your mentors. We don't talk about this enough, is, being able to talk to your mentors, talk to your other leaders that are in your property or part of your portfolio, and saying, this is what's going on. How do you recommend what's working for your department on, whether it be the employees are always showing up late? How are you holding your team accountable? How are you bringing it to the forefront? But start talking about it, especially if you're unsure of where to start, is, always utilizing your mentors, as just maybe it helps just talking about it out loud, to then you figuring it out yourself by talking about it out loud.
Absolutely. I love that.
Any
Well,
other
this was
last
great.
tips for
That, not
perfect?
really, just, I think you wrapped it up with a bow. So that's just lovely.
Awesome. Well, thanks again, Michelle. It's always great. It's great when we're doing our training together and talking about these topics for our viewers and listeners.
Yes. Thank you so much, Stephanie. And thank you, everyone, for being on the other side. Feel free to reach out to us on LinkedIn if you need a little extra push or motivation when it comes to holding people accountable with kindness.
Great. Thank you.